The movers and shakers of Del Norte County, or at least a representative sampling of them, gathered last Friday at the Elk Valley Rancheria Community Center for the 2019 Economic Summit. The summit, a sort of State of the Union for Del Norte County, is put on every year by the Crescent City Del Norte Chamber of Commerce in an effort to highlight the past year's successes and the coming year's hopes for the economic well-being of Del Norte. And this year, KFUG Community Radio was in attendance. Along with hearing presentations from city, county, and harbor officials, summiteers were also treated to updates from the Humboldt Del Norte Film Commission, an industry update from our local Realtors Association, and an informative, fact-heavy speech from keynote speaker State Senator Mike McGuire. But key to this year's summit was the unveiling of the new community guide, Discover Del Norte, and the county's new branding, a tourism-oriented marketing strategy formulated in partnership with Vertigo Marketing of Oregon. Just before the summit got underway, Sarah Carone, executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, had this to say.
We are so excited to unveil our new branding and the Discover Del Norte. The energy is building in this room, and we are about ready to see the future of Del Norte County.
The summit began with opening remarks, followed by a presentation from Vertigo Marketing about tourism in Del Norte, planning and spending habits of tourists, and how best to grow the industry. The new tourism-oriented website, Visit Del Norte, was previewed as well. Next came the state of the local housing market. Then Supervisor Chris Howard introduced a man named Adam Goldstein, a self-described millennial nerd who co-founded Hipmunk, a travel planning website in the Bay Area. In his travels, Adam stumbled across Del Norte and has since fallen in love with our little community. He's currently building a second home here. Adam described a future of food trucks and hipsters with big city cash, to which the room responded thunderously. After a couple of hours, the summit broke for lunch, and KFUG worked the room to gather the impressions of some of those in attendance, like Crescent City Council member Alex Fallman.
I just overheard a girl tell Mr. Fabriquez that she got a job offer. I think, when the community gets together, we can really see all the opportunities that we have. Offered today, just now, just before I walked over here. So, that's the opportunity that Del Norte County and Crescent City has. I'm glad to see that our city manager is going to be talking later today, so you'll get to hear all of what's going on with the city of Crescent City and how we're hopefully making your life better.
Here's former Triplicate publisher and Chamber of Commerce chair, Cindy Vosberg.
I think it's great. I think the presenters have done an excellent job. I think the Chamber's on the right track with their marketing and their vision, and I'm really glad to be here.
State Farm Insurance agent and local head of the Red Cross, Mary Dorman, found much to be interested in.
Mary Dorman, thoughts so far on the Economic Summit?
Actually really impressed and love the new information, love hearing from the Film Commission about how much money. We'd heard about the direct money. I wasn't aware of how much indirect money had come in, and I'm excited to hear the rest.
Yeah. Do you have something you're looking forward to more than others?
No, part of it was listening about the homeowners information that, of course, for my business is really important to hear about. It was great to see the rollout of the new emblem. I'd seen some of the early renditions for the county, so I've actually already posted on my Instagram one of the photos I took at the beach and did the hashtag, so
you're
hopefully that helps.
Right on.
Yeah, so I'm excited. It's full house, which is really incredible, and here's to greater and better things.
Former City Council member and Mayor Catherine Murray and former Harbor Commissioner Jim Ramsey were easy to corner for a comment. They were sitting at my table.
Jim Ramsey, Catherine Murray, we are 2 hours into this thing now?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts so far with the Economic Summit?
There's a lot of very good information that is coming out. It could be delivered a little bit more timely. It could be more quickly delivered. Maybe we could have some more information.
And I agree. It was a little bit lengthy, the first presentation, and I think part of the issue is that it was dry with statistics. So maybe a little less statistics and maybe a little briefer presentation for that first one. But it's a wonderful turnout, and it looks like the the people here are very enthused, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the day.
Do you have a favorite thing you're looking forward to?
Senator McGuire.
Senator McGuire. What about you, Jim? Is there a part of this that you're looking forward to more than others?
Well, I actually have two. I'd like to hear what Charlie's going to say about the harbor, obviously, and I'm also a big fan of Senator McGuire.
After lunch, the summit was treated to a surprise announcement from Mayor Blake Inscore and County Supervisor Chris Howard regarding Crescent City's sister city relationship with Rikuzen Takata, Japan.
They had heard this story about a boat making it from Japan to Crescent City, and how a bunch of high school students decided to clean it up and send it back, and how somehow out of all of that, a relationship was built, and that all kinds of crazy things were happening, and that they were going to develop beer, and they were going to be selling cheese in Japan, and all this crazy stuff. And so they just tried to find somebody that they had a connection to, and because Bill was part of that initial discovery of the boat, and his son was a part of that whole process, he said, yes, it's all true. And let me give you some names of some people to talk about what this is all about. And so some of us have had that opportunity. And I will just say this. One of the criticisms that we did have, and it was a well-founded criticism about the sister city relationship, is it worth spending public funds on what maybe seems to be nothing more than a really feel-good story about a disaster in Japan that somehow connected our communities? Is it worth it? Well, the question I always ask is it worth it to do something that is just an extraordinary act of kindness? Because that's what our young people challenged us to do. And I've always said that it was worth it. And I said from the get-go that we do not even begin to understand the economic development that's going to come from this, the understanding of disaster preparedness, the sharing of cultural ideas. We just don't understand just how big this is going to be. Well, David Picker began to tell us how big this could be. Kyle, can you put this up? David Picker said, why don't we tell this story as an NBC feature in 2020 as our lead story for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, Japan. So David Picker and his team are going to be in Rikuzen Takata in a week, doing their initial scouting out of locations, talking to people. Chris and I were on Skype last night with city staff, talking to them in preparation for this. The reality is, we don't know exactly how this will all play out. Listen, NBC could do all this legwork, and then we could end up being a 30-second blurb in the midst of the Olympics. 30 seconds with 30 million people is worth an awful lot to Del Norte County. But they're not talking about 30 seconds. They're talking about this being the feature storyline of out of tragedy comes hope. The building of relationships across an ocean that all began because of a group of high school students who said, why don't we clean it up and send it back? That's the value, and that's the real worth of Crescent City and Del Norte County, and that is why people like Adam Goldstein come here and fall in love, and that's why we need to continue to build together, and it's why sometimes you have to take a risk and invest those public funds, even when people say it's not worth it. I say it's always worth it when you're doing it for the right reason. Good things ahead.
To be sure, that announcement was the high point of the summit, even given the usual oratorical excellence of Senator Mike McGuire, who outlined the current state of funding for Last Chance Grade, as well as fielding several very specific questions from audience members. As the crowd thinned after the conclusion of the summit, I pigeonholed some of the attendees and presenters to get their post-summit impressions. Here's Supervisor Chris Howard when asked if the summit was a success.
Absolutely, 100% success. This is the kind of energy our community needs to be moving forward with. It's been a long time since the community could continue to celebrate our successes. Today, there's no question there were successes here in this room.
What is different this time around?
You have a feeling of positive change, a momentum that is continuing to move us forward from times when it was very difficult here to operate any form of business because we didn't have the infrastructure in place. And I've been here long enough to know that. The last 25 years have been difficult for Del Norte County. Coming off the things that Blake just spoke about, which was specifically a resource-based economy, how to transition a massive loss in workforce, whether it was commercial fishing, whether it was the forest industry around the mills that we lost here, how to transfer that energy that was a low point for our community, get people back on board on what a new economy might look like. Without those dollars, which Blake spoke to, coming into our governments that help support the infrastructure and healthcare needs and policing needs that we have here, we won't have a tax base in which to rely on. And as we know, with legislations affecting the state of California today, what Senator McGuire had referred to, the state continues to legislate things that we currently as a community have very little ability to afford. And so those are what we call in the business unfunded mandates. But we are continuing to face those unfunded mandates. So we continue to chap our general fund in order to fulfill those obligations that the state puts forward to us. If those continue to grow at the rate they're growing, how do we afford those? It gets back to a catch-22. We either grow our economy that puts more dollars into our general fund through taxes, or we stay where we're at and face potential bankruptcies like we've seen in many communities here in the state of California. I don't think that's where we want to be as a community. For me, it's moving forward, not in a status quo basis, but moving forward with a vibrant new economy. And that vibrant new economy, for me, specifically revolves around agriculture and around tourism.
And Supervisor Lori Cowan had this to say.
I thought it was a great day. A lot of different areas were covered. Very excited about the new marketing plan. We've been working really hard, the Visitors Bureau, on that since last February. Vertigo, I have all, the support with them. I think they're going to do a great job, and I hope the community embraces that. Listen to people like Adam. That just inspires me. That his ideas, those are good ones. I mean, think of all the good things that have been accomplished this year. We got new airline service, jet service. We were told that never happened. We have a brand new terminal that I'm sure you've seen that is just truly amazing. We've got partnerships with the city. Like Jay said, the city and the county work together so well, and I've never seen that before in the years I've been here.
Is that because of Eric?
I think it's everybody.
I know you're from the county. You're not going to say.
No, I love Eric, but I want to say it started before Eric.
Okay.
But Eric was over there as well. It's all the departments working together. It's not just the leaders. It's everybody. The boards working together. The employees working together. And yeah, Eric's a big part of that. Absolutely. Terminal. Everything that. We have a senator, an assemblyman, and a congressman that literally care about what's going on up here. Jay talks about that late night call. He's the same way with me. The senator does not think about, calling to checking on us. That to me is amazing. I don't think that happens everywhere. It was a good day. It was all the things that are happening. The RN program, piece of my heart. That's been in the works now. I think I've talked to you about it in the past. To know that it's coming to fruition next year, that is huge. That's a big deal. That's a big win for us. So there's just a lot of big wins going on. So to be able yesterday to be with Chris and Matt and Richard and everybody in LA, and to be able to talk in front of the CDC and tell them our story, to talk about what that means to us in our own words, was an amazing experience. And to get that money is huge. We've never gotten money to go to an alternate route. We've spent $85 million to keep it in place, but we have never seen money towards an alternate route until 2 years ago. And this is the biggest we've ever seen, was what we got yesterday.
And it just, this community is beyond impatient for some sort of movement to happen on all of that.
Well, and you hear comments, I was reading them last night, they've been studying it for years. No, they have not, ever. They've only looked at the one route. This is the first time ever that we're putting money and studying somewhere else. That's the big thing. So,
any hope in addressing the timeline, which is always a disappointment for people who hear all of this? Because now it sounds like the 2039 thing is kind of like what we're talking about. The initial.
Well, they've always said that. I think they always will because they're going to be conservative. Yesterday, what I heard from the CTC was, we want it quicker. We want it faster. We're going to be on top of it. They're going to be here in November when they talked about that summit. You'll see commissioners from the CTC who are coming up, who Jerry Hemmingson and myself, Supervisor Hemmingson, were in a meeting with them a year ago, inviting them up here. And then now all the other key players and Caltrans and the senator have formed this, they're doing a town hall, and everybody's coming up in November. That's big. Another big step is getting them up here, letting them see it, because talking about it in LA is different than walking it in Delaware County. When Malcolm Doherty went out and Lori Berman came on, who's a new state director of Caltrans, the first call we made was, Lori, please get up here. I remember calling Matt and saying, Matt, Lori needs to see that. Miss Berman needs to walk this. And she was up here. Matt Brady had her up here by May, walking it with us. And I think that's just important all the way down the road. But what I saw yesterday at CTC from those commissioners is they're buy-in. They're in it. They want to see it happen, and they want to see it happen quickly. So that's key. But it's California. So to all those people who say, why does it take so long? You chose to live in California. You've got to know that we're the hardest state to get anything done with the most regulations. That's just our reality. I don't like it either, but it's our reality.
Well, yeah, I mean, in no other place do you have to, going through a World Heritage site, going through all of these, and then finding out, I'd never heard before that it's also weak on the east side too. So
I sit on that stakeholders group, so when we get together for days, and it is, there's more land sites on the other side.
Oh my God.
When asked if there was anything that the summit hadn't focused on that maybe should be highlighted, Mayor Blake Inscore had this.
I think that the one piece that we're not sure how to talk about it is that we still need to develop small businesses. We have had the growth of some chain stores come in, Big Five, CVS, Tractor Supply. Those things are valuable. They're valuable to our community. I know that's not always what people want. We don't need another drugstore. We don't need this. I get that, okay? But those are employing people who live here. They're paying taxes. Those are valuable assets.
Yeah.
At the same time, I really believe we need to find a way to develop small businesses. I know that that's part of what we're going to be talking about with this comprehensive economic development strategy with the SEDS, both with the city as well as city, county, harbor. But we have to find a way to do that other than just giving people money. See, that's what we've done in the past with economic development and trying to engage with the entrepreneurial spirit and small businesses is give them high-risk loans. And then we know that small businesses are facing an uphill battle from the get-go. It's not about just giving them money. We need to provide them the support, and I think that we're working towards that. I think the EDC is trying to do that. Tri-agency needs to get back into the game. We need to look at some of the successes that we've seen. We need to look at Port au Prince. We need to look at Seaquake. We need to look at Averill. We need to look at some of these businesses that are making it at different levels and say, what did they have? How can we reproduce that? And I think I'd like to see us in the next 3 to 5 years be able to talk about 10 more small businesses that are finding success. We don't have a ton of empty storefronts downtown. People think that every other store is empty. That's not the case.
They can remember when it was.
Yeah,
and it has.
But to be able to fill those up, if we're going to have the Adam Goldsteins move here and other people are going to move here, then we need a thriving local small business economy. We need little shops that people can walk through. We need to be able to have this balance of big and small. And we need to also be thinking about what kind of businesses, whether that's home-based businesses, whether that is work at home, like Adam mentioned, from tech companies or whatever. We need to find a career pathway to bring our young people back. They leave, and there's got to be something more than come back and work at the prison. There's got to be something more than come back and be a teacher or whatever. We've got to find strategies that says that there's a way to make a living here other than just a government or a public job.
Okay. And here's Supervisor Chris Howard answering the same question. What did we miss?
Well, there's a lot of things that we could discuss there that will be bubbling up in the near future that, at least from a county standpoint, will be on the radar for the next economic summit. I am not going to unveil those right now, but the ones I wanted to go into more detail on, more specifically around healthcare, there was a few mentions of it here today. AB 204, carried by Assemblyman Wood. That's one thing that the community has been focused on for well over 7 years. Because it impacts our ability to afford the cost of health care at our local hospital. It is literally what has driven people 2 miles or 200 miles or whatever. How many miles? 2 hours. 2 hours to the south or 2 hours to the east to seek alternative health care because they can't afford the cost of their health care here in our local community. This bill will begin to focus on those needs. That should have passed by the time our next economic summit rolls around. There's a lot of water we got to carry there.
And what about the Adam Goldsteins of the world? By courting tourism, do we run the risk of painting ourselves into a corner and becoming a community that exists only to serve those who can afford to live here? Blake Inscore had this in response.
Now, I don't think we're painting ourselves into a corner because we're always going to have a economy base here because of, unless the prison closes. So it's not. So to me, I look at that and say, okay, well, they've got 1,400 employees, which is a huge portion of our workforce. And there's always going to be a portion of our workforce provided by the county, the city, the school district. Those jobs are going to be there as long as there is at least a foundational economy that's provided because of the prison. And I don't think that we should dance around that.
And before that, it was the resource-based, and so you've got...
But the resource base is not going to come back.
No.
So if we're talking about transitioning to our primary focus outside of the public sector as being tourism-based, and what that means is that we're not just talking about bringing people here to stay for a day or 2 days or 2 weeks. We're talking about introducing people who don't know Del Norte County, who don't know Crescent City, to this area, who come back like Adam Goldstein and say, holy cow, I didn't even know this place existed. And now I can come back here and say, well, I'm going to invest some money here. I can buy a place here for a third of the cost that I can buy in other coastal communities in California. So that what starts as this idea that we're going to increase our tourism component begins to take on another nuance in that it introduces people who become return visitors, who then become potential homeowners, business owners, people who may not live here year-round, but who realize, my goodness gracious, I can have a part-time place here and then turn it into an Airbnb when I'm not, and I'm making money, and those are things that are going to add to our economy because those people are spending money for receiving the transient occupancy tax, and then those people are going to come in and invest in our community. I don't see a downside. Now, does that,
I lived in
from the tourism standpoint?
From the tourism standpoint, when Adam Goldstein is up and he's talking, and I understand everybody is very appreciative. I lived in San Francisco pre.com boom, and I lived in a one-room apartment, or not one-room, one-bedroom apartment with my wife, $800.
Right.
That same apartment's $3,600.
Sure.
Any concern, smaller scale, that sort of thing happening here in Del Norte County with more Adam Goldsteins moving in, building 2 homes, driving up values, and maybe the people who are left here to work in the service industry on the tourism side can't afford to live in the place where they live? I mean, I think
it's a valid concern on a sort of this theoretical level. The difference is we are always going to be remote. We're never going to be at the intersection of the 580, the 880, the 680. We're never going to be there.
Yeah.
We're never going to have 3 major international airports within an hour.
So our remoteness will mitigate that kind of hyperbolic
I believe it will.
growth?
I think that we could see significant growth, and even the fact that may in fact raise property values that may cause a person like myself at a middle income to say, well, I can't afford to buy a home here now because of this. But look at what that does to all the people who've invested their time and money here for the last 50 years. What about the value that adds to what they have? And the reality is we cannot go back to a mindset from the 50s that says everybody's going to have a house, 2 cars in the garage, and a chicken in the pot. I understand that would be a nice world, and at my age, I still think that way sometimes. But the reality is I don't need all those things to be able to live and enjoy a community like this. Are there risks of having outside development come in, people who maybe are a different tax bracket investing? There's always going to be risk. Is it a risk that I'm willing to take? Absolutely, because you bring in people like that and they increase our tax base. I have to look, it's like, how do I provide services for you, for Chris, for myself, for my constituents? Those kind of one development that brings in 10 new residential homes that are above our median could put 2 more police officers on the street. Is that worth it? To me, the potential is. I don't know where all this is going to go.
Well, yeah, and nobody does. And I was just in the midst of all the good feeling in here today. This was just kind of a topic that came up, and we're going,
I think it's a fair question. I just think that our remoteness does just what you said. It mitigates a lot of that, because while there will be people who will be turned on to this idea, I don't think we're going to see a mass migration. We're not going to see a Montana or a Wyoming.
Okay, sure.
We're not going to see people because the access into those places out of major markets is much different than what we have here. And 82% of Del Norte County is already public land. So they're not going to come in here and buy up major plots of land to create their private reserves that nobody can go to, because there's not that much land available. I got 1.6 square miles in the city limits. Would I like to see the development where Costa Norte is? Would I like to see that go through? Would I like to see it come to fruition? Would I like to see 37 units that may be midline priced at $400,000 get built and all be purchased out? Yeah, because I know what that does to our city economy and what we can do as far as using those tax dollars to provide services to the rest of our residents. It's a little intimidating, though.
How so?
Because you don't know whether or not you can keep up with that mindset. Can you look at this and say, hey, we're really growing, people are really coming here, are we really prepared psychologically and from an infrastructure standpoint, both our mindset and our actually boots on the ground, to actually serve these people? We've got to really be thinking hard, and we've got to be positioning ourselves to say, are you willing to do the hard work? Are you willing to spend some of your political capital to say, listen, trust us, we're going to take some risks? Knowing that if things don't all pan out with the way you may envision, and that somebody can turn you out on your ear and say, well, you said we were going to have all this development and it still hasn't happened in 3 years, so we're going to throw you out of office. Well, so be it. We've got to take some risks. And we have people who are taking risks right now. I mean, Chris and I talk about this a lot, and he's seen a lot of things from a business standpoint that I haven't seen. But I'm just convinced that we've got to work together, and that the risks are worth it. That's my take. The risks are worth it.
After the economic summit, KFUG's Mike Thornton and Paul Kritz, that's me, sat down to reflect upon their day spent eyeing the future of Del Norte County. So, Mike, we sat at our table in the back there and discussed a lot of things during the economic summit. Of course, everybody super stoked about all of these things. They got this guy, Adam Goldstein, up, and he talked about Del Norte County, and big announcements were made. But I don't know, were there things, as I asked some of the politicians there, Blake and Lori, are there things that weren't covered in Friday's festivities that maybe might have been or should have been?
Well, that's a really good question, because I think a lot of it has to do with, well, what was the actual focus of all of this? And it seemed like it was really focused on tourism and improving and or turning Del Norte and Crescent City into a kind of a high-end tourist retirement destination. And I think I would have liked to heard more about a more diversified economic development approach. And there are real concerns, I think, about putting all of the eggs in the tourism, high-end weekend home retirement community approach to bringing money into the community.
It's, you wonder, we talked about rebranding at the Economic Summit. The Chamber of Commerce brought out their efforts to rebrand Crescent City, Del Norte County vis-a-vis tourism and such. But, maybe we should just change the name of Crescent City to Airbnb California, right?
Well, I'm a little bit concerned about that. And also this whole idea of what it sounded like. And just for people's edification, we're working on getting Adam Goldstein to come on KFUG to talk more about this. And it sort of sounded like what we were really saying was turning Del Norte and Crescent City into this kind of like almost bedroom community for the Bay Area, where people they would fly in and out on, the airlines,
or their own private planes.
Or their own private planes. And it's like, well, I understand we desperately need economic development in this community. There's no doubt about it. I guess what I hope is that there is some thought and discussion about the cons of that. I mean, do we really want a community that exists to serve kind of hipster Bay Area folks? Maybe that's what we want. But I know, like, if I had children here, I would want them to be able to aspire to local employment that entailed being more than a high-end maid or a bartender or a cook or somebody who exists to serve, an out-of-area economic elite that sees this as a retirement and bedroom community for, wealthy Bay Area folks.
Yeah, exactly. The as I'm talking to Blake Inscore, talking with him, and I pointed out, I lived in the Bay Area, kind of right at the end of when you could live the working class, and even back then, when you could actually still live in the Bay Area.
Right.
An apartment I had was $800. It's pushing $4,000 now these days, and it's such a crazy scene down there. And I asked him, are we afraid of that? Maybe even on a much lesser scale, but happening in, it's the same sort of criticisms people had with the legalization of marijuana. And if people, carpetbaggers were going to swoop in and sort of, drive up values and kind of ruin the ecology and the economy here just for a quick buck. But I thought his response was interesting. I asked him, first off, he said that he thought in a clip that we've played that the risks were worth it to have economic development. And it seemed, I also asked him, same clip, I asked him about what wasn't covered here that maybe should have been or should be, highlighted next year. And he brought up exactly what you said. He would like to see a more robust attempt by a city and county to get locals to open businesses, to help them open. He says in the past, we've just thrown money at people, here, go, but, provide them more support as far as developing business plans and bringing their ideas to fruition. That is important to Blake. And so that's reassuring that he wants to see locals opening their businesses and generating income here and stimulating the economy with homegrown business. But yeah, is it worth it? We have we're still trying to get over the past in Del Norte County, even after all of these years being a resource-based economy. And we internalized, it feels like, the trauma of the 70s and 80s and having the fishing and logging basically go away and / be taken away by the state. We've got 80% of our lands are off the tax rolls here.
Right.
So we're sort of hemmed into this. We've got the prison. We've got what we can scrape up locally. So what's left? And it seems like tourism is kind of the only thing left, the only avenue available. But going forward, how do you see moving into tourism? Is it possible to move in responsibly?
Well, I think that's really the question, isn't it? Responsibly is that how do we maintain an environment economically and otherwise whereby the people who actually live here, who have been born and raised here, have a reasonable expectation to have an ability to be part of the social, economic, and community fabric? Or do they wind up just basically being set up to be servants to, wealthy retirees? And this has happened in other communities. There are a whole series of communities along the former Gold Rush corridor, the Highway 49 corridor in the Sierra Nevada foothills that, they were resource-based economies. That went away. They then turned into tourism-based economies. Then they turned into tourism-based economies and retirement-based economies. And then these people come in, they cash in the Bay Area, they cash in Los Angeles, they move to the area, they buy up the property, everything goes up. The people who actually live there can't afford to live there anymore. And then you get a situation like Lake Tahoe where some 70% of the housing is actually second homes.
Wow.
And they are mostly unoccupied, and the people who live there have nowhere to live.
Yeah.
And so it's not like, do you not want tourism? Well, of course, tourism can be part of an economic thing. Do we want entrepreneurs and people with money coming to the community so they can then spend that community and create jobs in the community? Yes, but we also have to have something, and that something needs to have an eye towards how do we support the people who have lived here, in some cases for many generations, and not having them pushed out by visions of dollar signs dancing in our eyes.
Yeah, it was worrisome in the in talking with Blake when he was saying, and these people coming in and investing and moving in and driving up property values and doing all of that. That helps those folks who are house rich and cash poor.
Right.
Well, yeah, it helps them one time, and it helps them to cash out. And then what happens? Because then, you're no longer house rich and cash poor, property values are up, and then you are handed this lump sum, and basically what do you do with that in this town where you've lived that's changing around you and getting more expensive around you? I mean, you can cash out. We joked about this. It's like if you cash out of Del Norte County, where do you go?
In California, nowhere.
No place in California.
Right.
You're talking, like we joked, the Ozarks, right? Not a bad idea in my head some days. But yeah, so he's saying, hey, that drives up property. Well, yeah, but that's almost like that's one of those, it's a Pyrrhic victory, right? It's you get your cash out, you get that, and then you're out of the game. And then it just leaves your home to be bought by somebody with the money who can move in and afford to live here.
Well, getting back to the premise of incubating local business, I know other communities have actually opened these kind of job incubation kind of workshop centers where people can actually come and get the type of assistance to actually create business plans and to get small businesses off the ground. Most of them, we have a lot of craftspeople in this community.
Oh, yeah.
And if there were a way that they could have assistance in accessing high-speed internet and marketing and those kinds of things to be able to market their wares outside of the community. And then ideally with some sort of internship training programs going on to help some of our younger people learn those crafts as well. And we don't want a craft-based economy either.
Yeah, but you're just using it as an example.
It's an example, yeah. And I think the thing is being thoughtful and forward-looking and strategic about it rather than, in some ways, what it sounded like you might be saying is so traumatized that, anything's better than nothing. Grab it while it's there.
That's the kind of mindset that I've grown up with in this community, and it's getting better. It's lessening. It was much more pronounced in the past, but yeah, it's almost like Del Norte County was just beat down at one point, and it was in the early 80s. There was like upwards of 25% unemployment in Del Norte County, and I remember those days, and I remember what Crescent City was like back then. And it's a far cry. It's much different now, but still, there's this underlying kind of what's I'm trying to remember the Bruce Springsteen song, like a dog that had been beat too much or something from Born in the USA. Right down to how we see ourselves in relationship with Curry County and Brookings, which is, we put them up on this shiny hill and we hate them because they're up on this shiny hill and we're down here, and it's reflected back to us. We've just been sort of, there's like traumatized. And there's a lot of hopelessness in this community that I don't think having a millionaire move in next door is necessarily going to alleviate.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting perspective, because I've seen that as well. The sort of the second class citizen sort of mentality, like, oh, Brookings, but then I see people in Klamath do the same thing with Crescent City.
Yeah.
And there's just sort of this, we are downtrodden, we are less than, we are the unwanted stepchild, and, wow, a rich guy likes us.
Yeah, right?
Somebody loves me.
It's like the person with like low self-esteem who's like, going to throw themselves into this abusive relationship because somebody's showing them attention.
Right, and we don't know that it's going to be an abusive relationship,
no.
but yeah, that's a really good point, and it's really interesting, because so much of some other things that I was involved in had to do with and I really believe this, that, raising of human dignity is an incredibly important thing, particularly when we're talking about the poorest and the most marginalized. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something to be said about the raising of dignity and self-worth and self-respect of some of our community leaders too, when it comes to looking at these economic development schemes and strategies. Mm-hmm. It's like we don't have to live at the waiting for somebody from somewhere else,
some prince to write
in and save us, and that doesn't mean that we don't want tourism. We want people to come and enjoy the beauty of our area, and to do so responsibly and respectfully, and spend their money and have a good time and want to come back. Mm-hmm. And also, though, at the same time, make sure that we're not relegating our kids and their kids to a future where aspiring to be a maid at the best hotel in town is like, oh, well, one day I'll be able to change bed sheets at blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's hyperbolic, and I know that, but at the same time, there's a lot of communities that's happened to.
Well, and by and large, anything in the service industry, the best you can hope for is a lateral move. You don't pull yourself up by the bootstraps in the service industry for the most case, unless you move up and open something.
That's right, unless you become the business owner.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things, and every sort of group, has its focus, right? And I think, on some level, when we're at an economic summit like the one we were at, well, that's who we're sitting at the table with business owners. And so they're looking at all of this from that perspective. Mm-hmm. And that's understandable. It's completely understandable. And at the same time, what I really hope is that we have leaders, community leaders and elected officials and others who are willing and able to step back from that sort of natural impulse of the individual small business owner and say, well, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be representing a much broader palette mm-hmm. of needs and desires and hopes and dreams here. And so, how do I make sure that I'm doing that?
Yeah.
While at the same time trying to deal with these current issues and needs of the people that happen to be in this one particular room.
Yeah, and everybody in that room, for the most part, everybody. I don't know. There's nobody I would say had nefarious reasons for being there. Everybody was there to celebrate hope and to celebrate what they hope is a good year and a good next year, a good future. It is all basically bottom line stuff. Everybody looking at dollars, and that's how they're judging, and that has its place. And it was called the Economic Summit. So fine, I understand that, but it just seems like there's a. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Excuse me. I'll take this opportunity to cough and edit it out.
Okay. No, it just made me think about something, but you go ahead.
It seems, as we were talking before about the Knight writing in to save the day, since the resource-based economy died, that's kind of been the paradigm for us here. State comes in and goes, okay, prison. There's your lifeline. This is a base for employment in your community because you can't log anymore and you can't fish as much, and so here we have the prison. And it seems like ever since then, we have kind of as a community been looking for that, not a handout, but that other to come in. It's almost like being so downtrodden, down in our own communal self-esteem, we don't think we can generate real economic change here, just natively.
Well, and when you said economic summit, it made me think, well, what is an economy, right? Okay. And what is the economy designed to do? What should it be designed to do? And I mean, I don't pretend to be an economist, but I mean, I think of it as, it is a structure and a medium and a set of tools for exchanging goods and services, energy, hopes and dreams and aspirations and all of that stuff, right? I mean, it's more than just like, I'm going to get money out of your pocket and put it in my pocket.
Is it?
It should be, I think, shouldn't it?
But if it becomes more than just that, is the correct term still economy?
I don't know. I mean, I see it as a vehicle for doing other things than just the exchange of money from one person's pocket into another. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, then we have to say, if we're going to do economic development, and it's more than just money moving from one place to another, that's something that takes a lot of thought, I think, and an ability to see it at multiple levels and through multiple perspectives.
Not just as something that affects the numbers that come after dollar signs, but that affect people's lives.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And I think there's an opportunity. I mean, in some ways, we're not starting from scratch, but we are sort of starting from a place where it really has to be built almost from the ground up in some ways. Mm-hmm. So let's try to build it right.
Yeah.
let's try to build it right. So that our kids and their kids and their kids are going, you know what? I can stay in Del Norte. Mm-hmm. I have a future here. I have a path to a decent paying job so I can support my families and all of that. I mean, let's start thinking about those things now. Mm-hmm. And that way, if we do, then maybe they'll become a reality as we move forward.
Yeah, I think that just in the U.S. at large, there's kind of a, I don't think people look at, I don't want to call it a dichotomy because it isn't a dichotomy, but the difference between viewing an economy as simply a money-moving function or viewing it as something that has some sort of moral or even idealistic content to it. And I think people pick and choose which term they apply depending on where they are or where they are in their interests and their situation. And maybe here in Del Norte County, one thing we should focus on is doing is resolving that and saying, all right, we have economic development. We can talk about just dollars and cents, but we also need to talk about. People talk about government as a business, and I hate that.
Oh no, because it's not. It's not a business.
The way to look at government for me is that government isn't a business. It's a life form. It's an entity. It's organic, and you have to look at it and judge its success by its health, as opposed to just the quantity of things that it has. And so, yeah, maybe we need to look locally. This is an interesting chance to sort of take some of the tensions that throw us as a nation overboard, to take them and go, all right, let's come up with a real, for lack of a better term, in this a 5-year plan. Let's come up with something that is not just about dollars and cents, not just about getting the Adam Goldsteins to move here and drink kombucha from Seaquake, but how to create more businesses like Seaquake. How to create, and this was something that was hopeful for me talking with folks at the Economic Summit. Alex Fallman, a city council member, said he had just overheard there was somebody who got a job offer, young woman who was there at the Economic Summit, talked to the right people, got a job. Talking with Alex Kwan from Redwood Rides, locally grown business from 2 young people who came from outside the area and stayed. They weren't native to here, but they came and they stayed. Adam Spencer and Alex Kwan started this business. They're approaching their 5th year, which is that's when it comes to small business, you're almost an old man if you're 5 years old. That's great. And he was super excited about the opportunities with the rebranding and with the new website and tying in their local business, which is ecotourism. That's the way forward, one of the ways forward in a lot of economic senses. So it's like the people can be helped by things like the Economic Summit, but it's almost like it's a trickle down. We're going to take care of these big picture things, and hopefully the money will trickle down. And that so seldom works. That's worrisome.
And I mean, this is the way that I'm conceptualizing what you're talking about at the moment. But so it's sort of like, what's the real goal, right? So I think the real goal should be creating a thriving community, and that the economy is part of creating that thriving community, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times what happens is like, well, we're going to create a thriving economy, and it's somehow or another that will create a thriving community.
Exactly.
Not necessarily true, because where do the benefits of that economy go? And if they're only going to, a certain group or certain individuals or all of that, well, those people will be thriving. Mm-hmm. But the community may not be thriving. So if the goal is to have a thriving community, let's start with that. Let's talk about, well, what does a thriving community look like? And then how does an economy play into making that happen?
Exactly. All right. Well, that's our take on the Economic Summit. Anything you'd like to add? I do want to add that I was Blake Inscore. I always like talking to him, and he did seem to be cognizant of that, about wanting to get a local business ramped up, and to help those people who have ideas and the wherewithal to create a business locally to do so, and did understand the dangers involved with pushing. Well, with people with a lot more money coming into the area and changing the scene. So that gives me hope. So I guess it's just up to us as citizens to stay on top of all of that and make sure that they maintain that focus.
Well, and I think you really hit on it with that, is that those of us who are residents of a community, we have a responsibility in this as well. Elected officials, I mean, they work for us. Mm-hmm. And we have a responsibility to supervise their work. Just as if you're a supervisor in a business, you're supervising the work of your employees. And we have a duty, a responsibility to supervise the work of the people who are employed on our behalf. And, like you were saying, I mean, nobody's a bad person. Everybody's trying to do what they believe is right. But we have to make sure that we're supervising their work. Mm-hmm. So that way they're doing what it is that we want and need them to do. And if we don't tell them what we want and need them to do, and then they don't do it, well, we can't get mad at them.
That's right.
If we're not telling them, how do they know?
Because in this instance, we are not customers or consumers. We're actually the bosses.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's a concept that has been lost.
Yes. And lost across the board, and there's a whole other topic I could go into about that, but that's absolutely true. So stay involved, keep these people, hold these guys accountable, these men and women. City Council meets twice a month. The Board of Supervisors meets twice a month. And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, go to Planning Commission meetings. That's the prices for how to get involved in your local government. Mike, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for going to the Economic Summit and sitting down today and talking it over.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
For KFUG Community Radio, this is Paul Kritz.